how El Salvador managed to transform itself from the bloodiest nation on the planet to the most peaceful in the Americas. Why the CECOT is one of the most dangerous prisons in the world. Who is the king of this prison? Discover the incredible story of how a prisoner became one of the most respected in prison. But before you begin, leave your registration with the like button and subscribe to our stories. They will surely catch you. Now, activate the notification bell so we can begin. The CECOT is the terrorist confinement center, a mega prison built by President Nayib Bukele to house the most dangerous gang members in El Salvador. The government has transferred thousands of terrorists linked to the Mara Salvatrucha gang, Barrio 18, and other gangs to the CECOT, where they live in conditions of isolation and surveillance. The living conditions in the CECOT are very harsh and precarious, according to some sources. The inmates live in concrete cells without mattresses, without access to open air, unable to talk to each other, and with a space of only 0.6 square meters per person. Furthermore, the prison is surrounded by an 11-meter-high wall with electrified barbed wire and has a system that blocks cell phone signals. President Bukele has told him that this will be the gang members' new home, where they will live for decades without being able to do any more harm to the population. The CECOT houses more than 9,000 of the more than 68,500 gang members arrested as part of the frontal combat against the gangs that President Bukele and his security cabinet began on March 27, 2022. Among those arrested in general are 1,201 leaders, 922 from the Mara Salvatrucha gang, and 279 from La Pandilla. The CECOT was presented as the largest prison in the Americas, with a capacity for 40,000 inmates, is exclusively for those considered high-ranking members of the gangs that have been building their power for decades by recruiting young people and controlling territories, spreading terror, division, and disaster in El Salvador. The government has said that the gang members imprisoned in the CECOT will never see the light of day again, and that this will be their new home, where they will live for decades, mingling without being able to do any more harm to the population. Furthermore, the CECOT is an example of the secrecy and accusations of opacity of the state of emergency approved after 76 incidents were recorded in just 48 hours in March 2022. There are numerous reports of serious human rights violations, from arbitrary arrests and torture to deaths in state custody. The CECOT has a very strict security system with surveillance towers, electrified and concrete fences, and monitoring cameras. The government has said that the gang members imprisoned in the CECOT will never see the light of day again, and that this will be their new home, where they will live for decades, mingling without being able to do any more harm to the population. However, and there are allegations that the CECOT violates the prisoners' human rights and that the exceptional regime that supports it is opaque and arbitrary. Some relatives of the gang members have expressed concern about the living conditions and health of their loved ones, and have asked to be allowed to visit or communicate with them. There are also organizations that question the CECOT's effectiveness in reducing violence and crime, and that propose more comprehensive and law-abiding alternatives. According to the Salvadoran government, prisoners who enter the CECOT will never leave again and will have no contact with the world. From the outside, this prison has a capacity for 40,000 inmates and has high security measures such as an electrified fence, surveillance towers, body scanners, and concrete cells. It is not easy to determine who the most dangerous members of the CECOT are, since all the inmates are considered terrorists by the authorities and have committed serious crimes such as homicide, extortion, kidnapping, abuse, and attacks on the police and the military. However, it could be said that the gang leaders who direct and organize criminal activities are the ones who pose the greatest threat to national security and social peace. Among the leaders in the CECOT are 922 from the Mara Salvatrucha gang and 279 from the 184 gang. These are some of the best-known names. Boris Alexander Baron, alias El Barney, leader of the Mara Salvatrucha gang in the eastern part of the country, accused of ordering more than 250 purges. Marvin Adali, Waikininia, alias leader of the Mara Salvatrucha in the western part of the country, accused of ordering More than 300 purges. Carlos Ernesto Mojica Lechuga, alias El Viejo Lin, historical leader of the Mara 18 gang, accused of directing an extortion network, distribution, and contract killing Jose Misael Cisneros Rodriguez, alias Medio Millan, leader of the Mara 18 gang in the center of the country, accused of participating in more than 50 casualties. Life in the CECOT is very hard and isolated. The prisoners there do not have no communication with the outside world, neither with their families, nor with their lawyers, nor with the media. Nor do they have access to any type of prison benefits, such as visits, education, work, health, or recreation. They only receive 3 meals a day and live in concrete cells without windows, without beds, without mattresses, without sheets, without pillows, without ventilation, without natural light, without drinking water, without toilets, without showers, without soap, without toothpaste, without toothbrushes, without toilet paper, without towels, without clothes, without shoes, without personal belongings, without books, without radios, without televisions, without phones, without internet, without anything. The CECOT prisoners only leave their cells once a day for 15 minutes to soak up the sun in a concrete courtyard surrounded by barbed wire and guarded by snipers. The rest of the time they remain locked up, handcuffed, gagged, hooded, isolated, guarded, humiliated, abused, tortured, beaten, burned, electrocuted, abused, dismembered, injured. CECOT is a hell on earth where human rights are systematically violated and where gang members are treated like animals, like monsters, like terrorists, like enemies, like garbage. Of course, although we've already mentioned this topic, I'm here to bring you more details about the criminals. Jose Misael Cisneros Rodriguez, alias Medio Millan, is a Salvadoran criminal who has been linked to drug trafficking, money laundering, and supplying weapons to the Mara Salvatrucha MS-13 gang in the department of Chalatenango. According to U.S. authorities, he is also a member of that criminal group and was included on the Clinton list, which entails freezing his assets and prohibiting him from doing business with him. His criminal history dates back to 2009, when the Salvadoran police identified him as a suspect in trafficking large quantities of narcotics and constantly changing luxury vehicles. That same year, he was identified as the alleged perpetrator of Santos Chavez's gift to a man with whom he had a problem in the United States, where he lived between 2002 and 2009. A witness also accused him of providing weapons to the Fulton Locos clique, a faction of MS-131. In 2010, the Attorney General's office prosecuted him for 3 homicide cases, but the specialized sentencing court in San Salvador dismissed the case in 2015 due to lack of evidence. In 2013, the United States Department of the Treasury declared him a target of persecution and placed him on a par with the leaders of MS-131. In 2015, the FGR accused him of money laundering, along with 2 of his relatives, after detecting suspicious financial movements and seizing his assets. However, sumptuous, in 2017, the 6th Sentencing Court of San Salvador acquitted him of money laundering charges. On April 28, 2022, the Salvadoran police recaptured him by illicit groups within the framework of the state of emergency decreed by the Minister of Security, Gustavo Villatoro, who described him as one of the main collaborators of financiers of the MS-1 gang in Chalatenango. His legal status and whereabouts are currently unknown. Remember that, so you don't miss out on the most intriguing stories. I've left a tag above that says subscribe. With just a click, you'll automatically become part of the channel. Let's continue with the story. On the other hand, Marvin Adal Y. Quintanilla, alias Mara Salvatrucha, is a leader of the Mara Salvatrucha gang who posed as a pastor of an evangelical church to enter the prisons where they were held. Other gang members, according to the Attorney General's office, were Piwa, the financial mastermind of the MS-13, and was in charge of collecting extortion money, purchasing weapons and drugs, and appointing leaders of areas within the Piwa criminal structure. He was captured in July 2016 as part of Operation Heiki, which sought to dismantle the MS-13's illicit business network. Among the assets seized from Pigua and his frontmen were restaurants, motels, brothels, auto repair shops, used car dealerships, and 25 public transportation units. Piwa was accused of criminal association, arms and drug trafficking, extortion, theft, and money laundering. However, Piwa was not tried along with the other 76 people arrested in Operation Haki, but instead remained in the pre-trial phase along with 17 others. Gang members. Furthermore, the FGR charged him with the crime of solicitation and conspiracy to commit murder, but it was proven that he committed aggravated homicide. According to authorities, Piwa allegedly ordered more than 300 attacks on rival police officers, prosecutors, judges, and witnesses. The current status of Piwa's legal proceedings and whereabouts are unknown. He was included on the United States Treasury Department's Clinton list, which entails freezing his assets and prohibiting him from doing business with him. Piwa is considered one of the 8 top leaders of the MS-13 and one of the main allies of the gang, Sinaloa cartel in El Salvador. Carlos Ernesto Mojica Lettuce, known as El Viejo Lin, was the leader of the feared Mara 18 gang, one of the most violent and powerful in Central America. Since his Zelda in the Cojutepeque prison, he ordered extortions, murders, and drug distribution throughout El Salvador. His voice was the law for his subordinates, who obeyed him without question. His cruelty knew no bounds, and his fame spread throughout the country. However, his criminal empire collapsed when justice caught up with him. In 2008, he was sentenced to 40 years in prison for the brutal elimination of his ex-partner, whom he dismembered and abandoned at different locations in San Salvador. In 2016, he received another 20-year sentence for ordering extortions from prison. In 2018, he was linked to the priest Antonio Rodriguez, better known as Father Tono, accused of influence peddling, legal groups, and introducing prohibited objects into prisons. Old Lin became the #1 public enemy, and his name was associated with terror, pain, and sinister events. His story is one of the darkest and most chilling in the Black Chronicle of El Salvador. What led him to become the leader of Mara 18? What secrets did he keep in his mind? What did he feel for the people he loved and hated? What did he expect from his future? These are some of the questions that may never have answers, and that only he could answer. But Old Lin took his mysteries with him when he died in 2020 from health complications in the maximum security prison of Zacatecoluca, where he spent his last years. However, these questions can be answered through the connections in his story. What led him to become the leader of Mara 18? Perhaps what led him to become the leader of the Mara 18 gang was a combination of factors, such as a lack of opportunities, family violence, the influence of his friends, a desire for power, a need to belong, revenge against society, or a simple love of crime. Perhaps Old Lin found in the gang a way to escape his reality, to express his anger, to impose his will, to gain respect, to feel important, or to have fun. Perhaps Old Lin had no other choice. Or perhaps he did and rejected it. What secrets did he keep in his mind? Perhaps the secrets he kept in his mind were many and varied, such as the names of his accomplices, the places where he hid money, the strategies he used to evade the police, the plans he had to expand his business, the weaknesses of his rival, the Mara Salvatrucha, or the deals he made with other criminals. Perhaps Old Lin also kept more personal secrets, such as memories from his childhood, the dreams he had as a child, the remorse he felt for his victims, the fears that tormented him, the doubts that assailed him, or the desires he couldn't fulfill. What he felt for the people he loved and hated. Perhaps what he felt for the people he loved and hated was a mixture of emotions such as love, hate, admiration, contempt, loyalty, betrayal and gratitude, resentment, pride, shame, joy, or sadness. Perhaps Old Lin loved some people, like his family, his partner, his friends, or his followers. He showed them his affection, his support, his trust, or his generosity. Perhaps Old Lin hated other people like his enemies, his rivals, his traitors, or his persecutors, and he showed them his rejection, his hostility, his revenge, or his cruelty. What did he expect from his future? Perhaps what he expected from his future was something uncertain, unpredictable, or improbable, such as getting out of prison, regaining his power, defeating his adversaries, dominating the country, escaping abroad, changing his life, or dying in peace. Perhaps old Lin had hopes, dreams, or goals and fought to achieve them. Or perhaps he had lost faith, motivation, or purpose and resigned himself to his fate as a parenthesis. Mara 18 is one of the most violent and powerful gangs in Central America. It began as a street gang in Los Angeles. In the United States, Mara 18 has alliances and rivalries with other criminal groups in both the United States and Central America. Some of its relationships are as follows. Mara 18 has allied itself with some Mexican cartels, such as the Beltran-Leyva cartel, the Juarez cartel, and the Tijuana cartel, for drug and arms trafficking. It has also partnered with other gangs, such as the Norteños, Michoacán family, the Mexican Mafia, and the Latin Kings to confront their common enemies. Mara 18 has as its main enemy the Mara Salvatrucha, its historical rival since its origin in Los Angeles. Both gangs fight for control of territories, illicit businesses, and criminal prestige. Mara 18 also faces other groups such as the Serenos 13, the Zaz, the Negros, the Sinaloa cartel, the Gulf cartel, and the Korean Mafia of Avon. I use Clanton 14 and AP 13. In addition, Mara 18 is pursued by security forces and extermination groups, such as the Black Shadow. Finally, the case of Boris Alexander, alias El Barney, was the leader of the Mara Salvatrucha in the eastern part of the country, one of the most feared and violent gangs in Latin America. He was accused of ordering more than 250 purges, that is, the selective elimination of members of his own organization whom he considered traitors, weak, or rivals. His power and influence were such that he could control drug trafficking, extortion, contract killings, and money laundering from the shadows without anyone knowing his true face. But one day, his criminal empire collapsed. The police, in collaboration with the DEA and the FBI, managed to infiltrate his inner circle and obtain key information to capture him. On September 26, 2009, in an undercover operation, they discovered a trap at a hardware store in Puerto de la Libertad, where he was supposedly going to deliver 6 kilograms of white powder to a buyer. What he didn't know was that the buyer was an undercover agent and that the hardware store was surrounded by police and military personnel. When he arrived at the scene, wearing a cap and dark glasses to hide his identity, he met the agent, who asked him to show him the merchandise. Barn took a black bag from his vehicle and handed it to him. The agent opened it and found it to be high-purity white powder. He then gave the agreed-upon signal, and the police burst onto the scene, pointing their guns at the drug trafficker. Barn froze, unable to react. He had fallen into the trap, was arrested, and taken to a maximum security prison where he awaited trial for his multiple crimes. However, fate had a surprise in store for him. In 2015, a judge granted him alternative measures to detention, despite the seriousness of his charges. The Barn took advantage of this opportunity to escape and disappear. He never signed a court order or appeared at hearings again. He became a fugitive from justice with an international arrest warrant. Since then, no one knows where he is or what he's doing. Some say he's taken refuge in another country. Others say he's changed his identity and appearance. And others say he continues to pull the strings of the Mara Salvatrucha gang from some secret location. The truth is that his case remains a mystery, an urban legend, a nightmare for the authorities.